All right, the first round of the playoffs have concluded, and most of us thought that there was one good matchup, and there turned out to be no good matchups as Ohio State blasted Tennessee. That might have been the biggest blowout of the weekend in many ways. Not necessarily on the scoreboard, as Penn State beat SMU by 28, Ohio State over Tennessee by 25. But if you watch the game, that might have been the biggest butt kicking of the weekend. It's kind of a close call. And unfortunately, it is a close call because really the college football playoff disappointed this weekend. Top to bottom, it was not a version of football that we were looking for, but we will move on to the next round in better matchups, at least in some locations. Do appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. Again, to run down all the scores, Ohio State over Tennessee tonight in Columbus, 42-17. Buckeyes ran out to a 21-0 lead. I certainly felt as though the officials kept Tennessee in the game with some rather questionable, no, not questionable, bad calls, but still it didn't really matter as Tennessee put up 10 points late in the second quarter to make it somewhat of a game at 21-10 at half, and certainly put the game in doubt at that point. So we went into the second half thinking, okay, Tennessee's got momentum, but Ohio State quickly, boom, touchdown on the board, more touchdowns, and just the Tennessee offense could do nothing in this game against Ohio State's defense. Basically, Nico Iamaleava being able to run. That was the entire Tennessee offense, was his running ability. And Ohio State rolled, and it was a near perfect performance by Ohio State. They looked the part. They looked like arguably the best team in the country, as I believe they're in that group of four. Georgia, possibly the Gunnar Stockton version of Georgia. We shall see. But Georgia, Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, I believe, are the four teams that have an argument for best team in the country. And so now we march on to New Year's Eve and New Year's Day with, of course, Texas over Clemson. That was the best game of the weekend. That was the most competitive game of the weekend, and Texas led by anywhere from 1 to 3 scores the entire game, never trailed except for 7-0 early. And Texas, in some ways, dominated Clemson. We posted an instant analysis video that nobody's watching right now, so please check out the video with Texas and Clemson. I somehow pissed off a few Texas people because I just basically said that there were a number of calls that went Texas's way. In no way did I challenge that Texas was not the best team on the field in that game. But Texas wins 38-24 over Clemson. Again, by far the most competitive game of the weekend. Clemson had a shot with 6 minutes left with the ball at the 1-yard line to cut it to a 1-score game. But Texas's defense was too stout, and Clemson, between Garrett Riley and Dabo Swinney, whoever took control of the play calling at that point, knucklehead play calls, trying to ram the ball straight ahead. Did they not see the Texas A&M game the week before or a couple weeks ago? Do not run against Texas between the tackles. Dumb. And of course, earlier in the day, SMU showed a flash there on the first drive. They got a 3-and-out from Penn State. They looked good on defense, and then they drove the ball down the field, had a 4th-and-1 in which Kevin Jennings could have run for the first down, or he missed a throw downfield to Matthew Hibner, which would have been a touchdown and would have had a 7-0 SMU lead. Penn State, after that, completely mauled them. And, of course, Kevin Jennings threw the ball away 3 times, and that made that a bit of a joke after what we saw on Friday night as Notre Dame being way too good for Indiana and Indiana not belonging in this playoff. So we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And I desperately got to say, for as much as I love the regulars calling, we are going to do something about this in the off season. We are going to maybe open up shows where we take nothing but new callers. We need fresh blood and new calls. So we're going to do our damnedest to try to get to some new people. So if you have never called the show, what you do is you grab the link that we're going to put back in the chat here. And we would invite for you folks to give us a call. And the call-in line is there in the chat. But in the meantime, let's go. Let's see. We got, do we have any new callers on the line? No, we don't. But the closest thing to that would be our guy, John. So we'll get John in here. John, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you, Mark?
Doing well. What's going on?
Oh, I'm just sitting here just eating an apple.
Okay. This is not necessarily the reason why I took your call.
No, I wanted to.
Very good.
I did want to talk about the pass interference call and the roughing call, so I'm glad that you brought that up. But I'm in agreement with you with the first round games being blowouts. I was expecting Ohio State to win by a couple possessions, but I wasn't expecting this.
I wasn't either, but once I certainly said a number of times that I knew that it was possible. I believed Ohio State to be this much better than Tennessee, but I just didn't know that they had it in them.
Yeah. And just looking, they kept saying it during the broadcast. Hindsight's, of course, 2020, but if Chip Kelly and Day's game plan was like this against Michigan, like, can we leave the Michigan game alone?
Nobody's going to leave the Michigan game alone. Obviously, they're going to talk about that during the broadcast.
Yeah. But, I mean, everyone knows that was a terrible game plan. But the biggest thing that I'm happy with today is Ryan Day and Chip Kelly showing that they had some kind of trust in Will Howard. Because that was not the case a couple weeks ago.
Well, we also have to understand that Will Howard may have been injured to a degree in that game. So I don't know exactly what happened there.
Yeah. That the Notre Dame Indiana game, I had a lot of confidence. Well, I still have. Well, let me just say this. I have confidence that Notre Dame can beat Georgia, even if Carson Beck was playing. I don't know if that's, say, a ballsy move to say, but did they rule out So Carson Beck's not going to play,
Carson
right?
Beck is not playing.
Okay.
That's how I understand it. So he's not playing, so we can only conjecture how much better Georgia would be with him. And if Notre Dame wins the game, there's going to be Georgia fans and all sorts of people that are going to say it's a tainted win, but that's the way football is. So, yeah. And I think Gunnar Stockton, I think with a few weeks time, so we're talking about SEC championship game played 2 weeks ago with another week in play, another 10 days. So they've got a month to get him ready, practically a month to get Gunnar Stockton. And the guy's been in the system for a long time, and he was just as highly recruited as Carson Beck. There's obviously a reason he's the second string and not the first team, but it will be a substantial win if Notre Dame can beat Georgia, even with Gunnar Stockton.
Yeah, he's got to make sure not to take any hits like he did in that SEC title game.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
got his helmet knocked off.
Yeah, that was terrible. I wanted your thoughts. Obviously, you said that some of the calls were bad in general, but what was your thoughts on that roughing call that took back the interception? And
I thought it was pathetic. I thought it was clearly pathetic. And this is why I think it's pathetic, is that, okay, I am not going to promote myself as a rules expert. I know what the rules of football are, obviously, but they're constantly changing in regards to how they're adapting and how much they are putting responsibility on these defenders and limiting their ability to be physical to play football. So I would have to go back, and this is something I should do at some point, and reread the rule book, the current rule book, because at one point, as you well know, a defender used to have like a step and a half to the quarterback. And now we've gotten to the point where they don't even have a step and a half to the quarterback. But once they hit the quarterback, there was at a point where defenders would take the opportunity to drive their body weight into the quarterback and drive them into the ground. Did I think that that was the best thing? No. A lot of guys would get hurt. And so they ruled against that. They took that out of the game. Great move. But that was years ago.
Right.
Took that out of the game. Then the next thing was that the defender couldn't even land on the quarterback. So the defender's trying to play football. And in the midst of trying to play football, he's trying to like contort his own body to move and roll while he's tackling the quarterback so he doesn't land on the quarterback. And now we've gotten to the point where that's not even good enough, because that's what the Ohio State defender did on that play. But
yeah, he went off to the side.
Defender, they now have to like raise their hands and like show that they're, once the ball's released. Now, here's another thing. When you've got your helmet buried in a quarterback's side as you're tackling them, do you always know when they've released the football? I would say no. I just think the whole thing is completely ridiculous.
Yeah, and even the official that they got up there in the booth said he practically jumped into the defender's arm.
Yes.
Like what do you expect the defender? Because if the defender pushes him hard while the quarterback's in the air, they're still going to call he's defenseless because he's in the air. So it's like I don't understand what you want him to do there. But I'll tell you this: the person I'm always impressed with, Jack Sawyer. That guy, that deflection where I thought he was going to have a pick six on. I don't know if you know what play I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
but he makes so many plays, like the pick in the Michigan game. But the guy I was impressed with today was Igbenogson, because the last couple weeks he has been struggling with not only penalties but also grabbing and everything. And he played very well today. Very well today.
Did. He really did.
So
did not play a perfect game. I saw him miss a tackle or two, but yeah, he played a good game.
Yeah, and then one more thing before I jump off here, I just wanted to give a shout out to your crew on Sunday nights. They let me join the group video call a couple Sundays ago, and I wanted to give a shout out to all them guys.
So, John, you're a member here at the Voice of College Football?
Yes, sir.
Well, they did not let you do anything. You have just as much right to join as they do.
I had a blast talking with Jackson, and I can't remember the Oregon guy's name.
Ben,
yeah, with Ben, Michigan man. I had a blast talking with all of them. The thing I brought up to them was the only way that Indiana had a chance is that they somehow figured out how to stop Notre Dame's rushing attack, and yesterday just showed that was the only chance they pretty much had.
Well, they pretty much did. Outside of one run.
Yeah, the one run, yeah. But that was a big momentum swing, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm not discounting what you're saying, because I would have said the same thing.
Yeah.
But once I looked at the stats, I was a bit surprised that Indiana did as well as they did. Notre Dame had less than 3 yards per carry over the course of the rest of those carries, 34 carries.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I only got to watch like the first half of that game. But
I think Indiana lost that game because Notre Dame's defense completely just put the clamps on them, allowed them to do nothing. Indiana's offense, which is obviously run roughshod over the weak portion of the Big Ten, scoring 43 points a game, was completely useless. Completely, utterly useless. Could do nothing in that game.
I thought the offense was going to be able to do more than what they did there. But that's the Notre Dame defense can play like that. I think they could make it to the national title game.
Oh, they could.
I mean, now there's a side of me that's like, do we, I would like to see Notre Dame in a national title, but there's also that side of, we've seen Notre Dame against heavyweight hitters in playoff games and in big bowl games, and they just never seem to show up. It don't matter who their coach, quarterback, team is. And would you want to? How would they fare against Ohio State, Texas, Oregon?
Well, they're showing up against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl.
You're right.
So we're going to know that they can continue on and play somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, And one more thing, I just wanted to ask: if you're rooting, are you rooting for Arizona State to upset Texas,
Am
and
I
or
rooting for it?
Boise State to
Sure.
upset Penn State?
I would say I'm slightly rooting for it. I was rooting for Clemson today, I would have to admit. I don't do a whole lot of rooting watching these games. I really don't. The older I get, the more I don't care, the more I just want to watch good football. But I was tending to root for Clemson today.
Yeah, and that piece they did on Klubnik and Quinn Ewers before the game, I didn't know that. I didn't know that they faced off in the high school championship, and that it's kind of ironic how the cornerback on Klubnik's high school team is now the cornerback on Quinn Ewers' team.
Yes.
So that was pretty cool to. I don't know how they keep finding pieces like this. I don't know how it keeps working out to where they can find great great pieces to put together before games. But all
Well,
right,
they have
Mark.
a lot of people working on these games. There's a
But
lot
that,
of research and a lot of personnel that goes into it.
yeah, and then I was going to say the joy about college football is you can root for the upset. I don't know if you know this or if you follow college basketball, but speaking of upsets, the Buckeyes took down number 4 Kentucky by 20 points today in basketball.
Okay.
So just another, I like Cinderella stories, except if it affects Ohio State, then I don't like them. But have a great night, Mark. I appreciate you taking my call.
Thanks for the call, John. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Bye.
I'll be starting to tell all of you Merry Christmas. So if I fail to do that, Merry Christmas, everyone. We appreciate you here at the Voice of College Football. We are running right now our ticker with all of our members, either on Patreon or here on YouTube. So thank you. You should see your name listed down below. I think I got to all of them, but thank you for that. Please subscribe on Patreon, or you can subscribe and be a member right here on YouTube. So check out those memberships. Okay. We also have our buddy Keith. So Keith, Michigan fan Keith, is calling tonight. So we'll take Keith's call. And I was looking for first-time callers, but it's been a long time since Keith called. So we want to hear from Keith. Keith, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark. Congratulations to Ohio State today. They look really good.
Well, that's very gracious of you.
Okay, I'm on record as saying I would like to see any B1G team win it. I'll be honest, OSU's on the bottom of that list, but
Sure.
I'd like to shut up the SEC for another year if we could.
Okay. So you're rooting for Penn State or Oregon?
Or Ohio State third. Yep.
Ohio State third. I would think you would root for Penn State over Oregon.
I actually like Oregon, and I think Oregon's going to be the most successful. Oregon's the only team in the playoffs that I don't see a flaw in. They're both on good sides on the ball. Both they don't have a low ranked unit, I believe. I think they're the only complete team in the playoffs.
Really? Oregon is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Texas is close, but Texas has one flaw, and I put it in the chat earlier. Texas's only flaw is they don't match up well against Georgia. If somebody doesn't take Georgia out and they have to face Georgia, Texas could be in trouble.
Okay.
Okay.
So you think Oregon's the best team in the country, and you think Texas or Georgia are next?
Or maybe Ohio State. I think Ohio State's right up there with Texas and Georgia.
Okay.
Okay.
And even though you're an old school Big Ten guy that's rooting for the Big Ten, you would rather have Oregon win over Penn State.
Yes, part of that is realism, is that Penn State's got an easy game next time. They have a better chance to get to the semifinals than anybody, I think.
Sure.
But Franklin against the good teams, I'm just not convinced.
Yeah, but we're talking about what you want. You came on here telling me what you wanted.
What I want is to see the B1G win.
Yeah, I would think that would be Penn State, because you know that if Oregon wins the national championship, even though they're technically a Big Ten team, of course, that a
They're
lot
a
of
newbie.
people will
Yep.
not give credit to the Big Ten.
I just disagree with that. I think I still give them credit. If Texas wins, I think SEC gets the credit. I think if Oregon wins, B1G gets the credit.
Oh, I totally agree with you. They are a full-fledged member of the Big Ten. They're as much a member of the Big Ten as Michigan is, or Northwestern, or whomever. But I'm just saying that there will be people that will say, well, this was the Big Ten just winning a championship because Oregon came in from the West Coast and the Pac-12 to win this.
Yep, I know there's going to be that. Yep. Yeah, the other point I wanted to make is I wouldn't be too hard on the OSU coaching staff. I think Wink Martindale did just the right thing to shut down a great Ohio State offense, which we saw tonight. Is that we gave a 10-yard cushion to all receivers most of the game if you watch the play closely. And that takes the top off of the routes. It allows the shorter stuff, but takes the top off. UT tonight, they were playing the opposite. Now I can't fault them and say, because NFL is a copycat league. When one team is successful stopping a team, you'll see every team down the road copies them and employs that same defense. That didn't happen. Tennessee didn't look at the Michigan game too closely. Otherwise, they wouldn't have played so much press coverage. And when you play press coverage against the best receivers in college football, you're going to get burned deep a lot. And I think that's what we saw today. I would not fault Tennessee for not copying Michigan because possibly that press coverage is what got them to the playoffs. Maybe that's what they played all year. And if they did, I don't fault them for not switching. But I think Tennessee matched up very poorly against the Ohio State receiving corps, whereas the Michigan defensive backfield matched up very well against them.
Well, you're certainly right about that. That basically played out. Now, in terms of how much that they were pressing the receivers, I'd have to go back and look at the Michigan game versus what we saw tonight, but I will take your word for it since you are well-schooled on Michigan football. And even though Ohio State didn't dominate at the run game today, certainly, although Tennessee is considered to have a good defensive front, I don't think it compares to Michigan's. And Ohio State at least had room in the running game. They at least moved the ball on the ground at times enough to keep the Tennessee pass rush at arm's length, as compared to what happened against Michigan, of course.
I agree with you 100% there. I had heard some of the talking heads in national, the Josh Pates and the others, and the Joel Klatz, talk about this elite front seven that Tennessee had, but they sure didn't look elite tonight. They looked like they were a letter grade or letter grade and a half below what Michigan is in the front seven.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And on closing, when I'm leaving, I'm going to agree with you, and I don't want to get in a big discussion about it, but I agree with you 100%. I think there were some awful harsh calls on Texas, and I mean on Clemson, and some and just a few soft calls on Texas. I saw a very imbalance in that game, and I didn't have a dog in that fight. I generally root against the SEC, but I think I'm objective in looking at that. I came up with the same conclusion you did.
Yeah, and I in no way think that Clemson would have won the game, but who knows? You just never know how a play that's called a certain way, a bad call can turn a game. You don't know, but so I'm not wanting to take the win away from Texas or anything like that. They had nothing to do with it. I don't think it was extremely egregious. I've seen worst officiated games, but I wasn't even looking for it. Just in the course of taking notes and watching the game, okay, well, that was a bad call against Clemson. Well, there was another bad call against Clemson. Well, there was a third. There were 3 or 4 that stand out to me. Now, of course, I got comments in from Texas fans that there were bad calls against them. Maybe there were. They didn't stand out to me, though.
Yep. Yep. So I agree with you there too. We're agreeing a lot tonight. That's that happens once in a while.
Well, we'll get back to normal here, Keith. I guess it's the holiday season.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Peace on
Yeah,
earth.
and when are you going to do your analysis of the Ohio State Oregon game?
Oh, meaning a preview of the game? Well,
Yes.
sometime from now until the game. I don't know exactly when.
Oh, okay. I hope I catch you then. I'd like to hear what you have to say on that day.
We will do a preview of the game. Yes, we will.
All right, good. It's always good talking to you, Mark, and have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Keith. Appreciate you stopping by, sir.
Okay.
All right. We're going to line up these calls start to finish here. So these will be in order of when you called. So we got Rob showing up. Rob.
Hey, Mark. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
And yeah, congrats on the Buckeyes. I said last night before I took off, I said go Bucks. And so as you congratulated me for Notre Dame's win, I'll congratulate you for the Bucks.
Thank you.
Yep. I honestly, that was like the biggest butt whooping of the weekend. I mean, so I want to hear Kirk Herbstreit's thoughts because he's trashing Indiana and these other teams. Let's have the same energy, huh? Tennessee didn't belong in the playoff. What do you think?
So I had a few people ask me to produce a video in response to what Sean McDonough said at the end of the Indiana Notre Dame game, of which I noted on here I was a bit taken aback by because he was, he was questioning the value of the Big Ten based on Indiana's performance, like Indiana was the flag bearer for the Big Ten or something. And Sean McDonough was saying, oh, the SEC and the Big Ten, they're considered to be the best conferences. And Sean McDonough is the one who said after announcing the ACC championship game, pointing at SMU saying, this team definitely belongs in the college football playoff. They are a definite college football playoff caliber team. And then they get trucked and Indiana plays a more competitive game against Notre Dame. And they're certainly not the team that people are looking at as being the forerunner for the Big Ten. And Sean McDonough is making all sorts of asinine comments at the end of the broadcast about the Big Ten. We really have to call into question the value of the Big Ten and the strength of the Big Ten because of this performance. And I'm like, can you at least watch Penn State and Ohio State play tomorrow before you make these asinine comments?
Right, and I was being a little bit tongue in cheek. I'm not claiming that Tennessee didn't belong. I was just like being a little facetious because I get tired of I just want to watch college football games, and I get a little bit tired of all the toxicity. Like, oh, this team didn't belong. They suck. They're the worst team ever. And it's like, okay, but like if you look at Indiana versus Ohio State, and you look at Tennessee versus Ohio State, that's basically the same game. And you could argue that Indiana played Ohio State a little bit better.
Oh, I think they played them considerably better.
Yeah. So, I mean, if Indiana doesn't belong, and again, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but Tennessee just got the brakes blown off them. And I'll say this, I'm not an Ohio State fan. I don't dislike them. But if they play to that level the rest of the playoffs, I think they're winning the championship. I mean, that was a very impressive win. Now, I think, as you said, you have 4 teams that can win. I'm going to throw Notre Dame in there. I think they're kind of a dark horse. They're not as surefire as Ohio State, and but I think Notre Dame, if they play their best, they could win. It's just, are they going to play their best, or are they going to go lay an egg? So
no, I
agree.
Have
to see. But But yeah, I think you're right. I think the playoffs typically every year you're only going to have like 5 to 6 teams that could possibly win it typically. And I still like the 12-team playoff. Yeah, the games were a bit not competitive, but I mean, at least we get to see these unique matchups at home stadiums, right? Like Texas and Clemson had never played before, which I find fascinating. And the home games are amazing. Like the electricity, the game didn't end up being all that great, but like the electricity for Notre Dame last night was insane. The electricity for all these games was insane. Oh, which brings me to another point. I think it was absolutely hilarious that Tennessee was bragging about planting a flag on Ohio State field. They were going into bars, apparently, the fans, and they were trolling Ohio State fans by playing Rocky Top on like auto tunes or whatever that is. All this kind of stuff they were doing and just trolling, and then you get the brakes beat off you. That's like Kurt Signetti behavior right there. It's like, and I like Kurt Signetti. I think he's a good coach. I think he didn't call a very good game last night, if we're being honest. But I think he's still a pretty good coach, and I would like to see a little more humility from him when he does take these big L's. I think one of the first questions that he took after that Ohio State loss was, "Does Indiana still deserve to be in the playoff?" And he just basically like scoffed at the notion that they could be questioned. They're just so good. They're Indiana. It's like maybe have a little humility. I mean, you just got blown up by Ohio State. It's like it's a valid question. But yeah, Tennessee kind of pulled their pants down, got their pants pulled down on national media. So I just want to see Kirk Herbstreit and some of these other guys that are ripping SMU and Indiana and even Clemson to some extent, which ended up being the most competitive game of the weekend. I want to see him have the same energy with Tennessee and the SEC.
That's right. If you're going to question a conference based on one game, then you need to be just as fair with your commentary or jump to conclusions across the board.
Right. And I guess I just want to say one more thing before I take off. Even though I said Notre Dame could win it all, I still have Georgia winning. I'm not an idiot. I'm a realist. I like our chances better than I have in the past playoffs. I think this is probably, even though we're banged up pretty bad, we're still like, this is probably the best Notre Dame squad in quite some time. And Marcus Freeman's actually impressed me with this. He's a great player coach, and that's not an insult. Some people say, "Oh, a player coach, that's like he's not a great X's and O's guys and all this." I've completely come around on Marcus Freeman. I was really down on him, if you remember, after that NIU loss, because he just had these strings of really bad losses to teams that they have no business losing to. And it's like, say what you want about Brian Kelly, he raised the floor of the program for Notre Dame out of those dark years. He just couldn't quite get over the hump. Marcus Freeman's shown that he can actually compete with the teams. I mean, Ohio State, Georgia, well, those were Brian Kelly teams. But yeah, I think Notre Dame has a shot, but I still have Georgia winning. I think Georgia's probably the best team in the SEC. I still don't believe in Texas. Like you said, if Clemson doesn't do the boneheaded play calling and run right into the teeth of that Texas defensive line right up the middle and got stuffed, like if they try to do like a little screen or something, like just do something creative, in the end zone with a pass, because Klubnik was on fire. Like he was doing pretty well. So just do a pass there that Texas knows you're going to run because they were set up for it. They were lined up for a run play. It's just that game should have been at least one score, or who knows if Clemson scores there, who knows what could have happened. But anyways, I'm going to let you go, Mark. I always enjoy talking to you. I know you got a lot of callers. So Merry Christmas and go Irish and Bucks.
Thanks, Rob. Merry Christmas.
Thanks.
Yeah, so the Cade Klubnik situation, that guy was the best player on the field for the most part, especially the best player with the ball in his hands. Let's put it that way. And Clemson is down by 2 touchdowns. They are hanging on for dear life. It was basically Klubnik and Antonio Williams and TJ Moore. Those 3 players were keeping Clemson in the game, just playing pitch and catch. They were phenomenal. Cade Klubnik was phenomenal today. He was phenomenal today. Like, I cannot overemphasize how good he was today, considering that he and his team and his offense were completely outmanned. He was running for his life. He was under pressure all day. He was tremendous in this game. And he is carrying this team on his back. And he is 2 yards away from getting within one score with 6 minutes left. He has driven the ball all the way down the field, throwing passes left and right, running like a madman all over the field, and they get down to the 2-yard line. Now, I understand the issue that you no longer have the ability to stretch the field, and a lot of their big plays were to Williams and to Moore by stretching the field, and you've eliminated that. You're at the 2-yard line. However, Cade Klubnik's the best thing you got going on offense. Roll him out. Roll him out. I would have rolled him out every down inside the 5-yard line. I would have put it on him to either make a play with his arm or his legs, not give the ball to a running back. When you're diminished at running back, you're down to your 3rd string running back. They were playing a wide receiver at running back, Adam Randall. And you're facing maybe the strongest, in addition to Michigan, strongest tackle-to-tackle defensive line in the country. And you're trying to slam the ball straight ahead the last 2 plays of that drive. Dumb. All right. Before we take our next call, we'll remind everyone that since we're in the holiday season, although this is not going to make it to your doorstep by Christmas, we are in the holiday season, in the gift giving season, and also in the football season, of course, which doesn't stop here at the Voice of College Football 24/7, 365. But it is the football season. Disputed national champions. Since we are talking playoff and talking championships, this is a good read right now or anytime throughout your year. Disputed national champions. You will enjoy it. I can just about guarantee that. Everybody has responded who has purchased the book and read the book and said it's a fine read. So we have tons of endorsements. I need to go grab those reviews off of Amazon and start to post those on social media. So we appreciate you checking this one out. The link is in the description section of this and all the videos. Super chats coming in. We appreciate those. Thank you, Erwin. Not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. I think there's more that goes with that. But Erwin, thank you so much for the 777. What am I missing there? That is the perfect number, 7. So I don't know if there's a Christmas theme with the 7. I don't know. But we appreciate that. Erwin coming back with this one. Quarterback jumps in the air because he was getting hit, and only way to get pass off roughing the passer. And I'll not say what I was going through my mind about men who use emojis. I think those are basically for women or communicating with women. I figure anytime I'm texting, if I am texting a male and I include an emoji, it's basically for one reason. It's because I don't believe that they have the cognitive ability to get my sarcasm. So I have to include the emoji. But any of my friends, I'm not including any emojis, none, unless it's a thumbs up, those kind of things. So women, that's different. You load up on the emojis talking to women. So I really don't know what that has to do with the roughing the passer perspective, but Erwin is letting us know that the roughing the passer was a correct call. That's fine. That's your opinion. I thought it was a lousy call. It didn't matter, and I don't know why it's funny, but that's fine. Jackson, appreciate you being here. Jackson, member for 16 months. Let's get the Voice of College Football to 100,000 subs. Thank you, Jackson, for bypassing any other possible milestone between here and there. Jackson knows the marching orders. 100,000 subs. Thank you for that, Jackson. So if you've not subscribed, please do. Terrence says, I'm a Michigan and I want give a shot out to Ohio State fans for chanting SEC. Love it. One more time, Terrence. I'm a Michigan, and I want give a shout out to Ohio State fans for chanting SEC. Terrence, we appreciate your super chat, and because you gave us a super chat, I will clean up your typos. I'm a Michigan fan, and I want to give a shout out to Ohio State fans for chanting SEC. I was actually, and one of the reasons why I was late here is I watched the game with a friend or a group of friends, actually, and therefore I had to come back from their house. But yeah, the first time we heard that, they said, Tennessee's losing 21-0. Why are they chanting SEC? They're getting blown out. And I said, no, that would be the Ohio State fans that are chanting SEC. All right. Thank you so much for the super chats. We will keep humming along here. We got Michigan Man on the line.
Hey man, I think people gotta. Here's my thing with the playoffs. When you are in a non-pro sport and the playoff expands like it is, you're gonna have we have blowouts like this in the 14 playoff. How many semifinal games, Mark, were uncompetitive?
Most of them.
Exactly. So I think people just need. I mean, this is inevitable, especially when you expand it. It's just going to happen more often. It's higher seeded teams playing lower seeded teams that most likely aren't as good or nearly as good as the higher seeded teams they're playing. It comes with the territory of a non-pro sport. This isn't the NFL where talent is evenly distributed. I think people need to stop complaining. And I want to say one thing to Derail, man, because I know he's an SEC guy. The two most dominant wins of this playoff so far were the Big Ten. The worst loss of the playoff so far was the SEC. The least impressive win of the playoff so far was the SEC. Do you agree?
Yes, 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 and yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I just think great. I thought that was the most dominant win so far was the Ohio State win. I thought, frankly, Tennessee looked like a middle of the pack Big Ten team. And I felt like I was watching Ohio State versus Michigan State any given year. That's literally what it looked like. Do you agree?
Pretty much. They raced down 21-0, and it would have been 28-0. But it was funny, as they were reviewing the interception that stopped an Ohio State drive when it was 21-0 and brought in the booth official, or the guy, the former official that they have come in to do the commentary, he pointed out, well, that should have been pass interference, because I think it was Jeremiah Smith was being mugged in the back of the end zone while he was trying to catch the ball. Yeah, it could have easily been 28-0 right there.
Yeah, great game plan by Ohio State. I thought people were talking about like that this matchup wasn't gonna favor Ohio State. Some people were, because they're talking about the D line and things. But I think when you actually analyze it in retrospect, Tennessee's offense has been terrible against decent defensive competition all year. They haven't been good. Their O line has been leaky. Their defensive line can be good on the edges, but I don't think they've been elite in the middle. And their secondary has been exposed a few times: Georgia, Florida, etc. And I thought the game plan defensively, especially, I don't know why teams don't just mimic Michigan's defensive game plan. I don't know why they don't do it. For 4 years, I haven't seen one team copy Michigan's defensive game plan. What are your thoughts there? I don't get it. I mean, for example, Tennessee was running one high press man. It felt like 80% of the game. And if us Michigan fans know, that's the last thing you do against Ohio State. When we had Don Brown, we got destroyed running press man one high when we did that. I don't know why teams don't try to cop. Maybe they go through a whole season and they run a certain type of defense and they feel like, we can't really implement all the things they do. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the first thought is that any successful coordinator on either side of the ball preparing for an opponent that they're unfamiliar with, you would pop in the tape of the team that was most successful on that side of the ball. So that would be number one, Michigan by far. And so you would go from there, especially since they were supposed to have, at least in the front seven, strengths and also talent. But our buddy Keith called a few minutes ago, Michigan fan, and he expressed basically what you just did in regards to the press coverage and just not understanding the best way to play those wide receivers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they left Jeremiah Smith on an island all game.
Yeah.
All game. I'm like, one thing you don't do is leave him on island. And it wasn't just on post routes. It was when he was in the slot, too. I mean, he's running a cross route, and there's, like, no defender there. And if there's a defender, it's one guy that's trying to catch up to him. I'm like, what are we doing? When Ohio State played Michigan, he had 3 guys around him the majority of that game. Like, he couldn't get away from being in the triangle pretty much. I feel like, I don't know, man. I feel like if Ohio State could get past these next 2 games, because I think it's going to be Oregon and Texas. I can't say it as a Michigan fan. They got good chances in the national championship game because I don't know what Georgia's going to look like with Gunnar Stockton. I have no idea what that looks like, right? And then Notre Dame. I don't know. I don't know if Notre Dame's capable of beating them, but I feel like they have their best chances they get these next 2 weeks. We'll see. I think usually the rematch favors the loser. Would you agree with that in terms of Oregon and Ohio State?
Yeah, I think that there is some kind of innate incentive, but more than that, it's just a strategy of you can go back and clean up your errors, but if you were successful, you tend to think that you're just going to continue to do what you did the first time.
Yeah, I gotta call this out real quick, Mark and chat. There's people that keep saying this. Bama should have been in. Okay, you say Bama should have been, but correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. Did they not lose to this Tennessee team?
They certainly did.
So I mean, like, people just gotta get over. They gotta get over this, man. Look, this is the way it's gonna be. All right. When you have an expanded playoff, the first round. Honestly, Mark, the first round's supposed to look like this. It's supposed to. When you have a high seed playing lower seed teams in a non-pro sport, don't you think it honestly probably should look like this? Regardless of the format?
Well, it looks like this because, like you said, the talent distribution's not even, and we've got 2 conferences that are better, substantially better than the other 2 conferences. Now, the one outlier is what we just saw, that most people, like, I thought this was possible. And when I say possible, of course it's possible, but I thought it was somewhat likely that Ohio State could be on its game and really blow out Tennessee. But I didn't think it was totally likely. And as an 8-9 situation and 2 10-2 teams in the SEC and the Big Ten, we would have expected this one to be the close game.
Yeah, and you know what? Because of the funky seating, it really wasn't 8 versus 9, though. You know what I'm saying?
True.
It was really a top 4 team versus probably the 9th ranked team.
Yeah, so
even at that.
Well, you basically had Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Texas 3, Penn State 4, Notre Dame 5, Ohio State 6 is what the committee's rankings are.
Yeah, well, do you think in a previous year, though, Ohio State would have been ranked higher than Penn State?
Well, I think they should have been, yes.
So, I in my opinion, it's a top 4 team versus a team that's barely top 10 in reality.
I'd agree with that.
So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. People need to get over it, man. That's pretty much all I got to say. I hope Oregon wins next week. Of course, we'll see. I do think it favors the person that lost in the rematch. It seems to be that's the way it goes typically. So we'll see what happens. I don't think Texas, to me, is just too wishy-washy for me to put any faith in. I don't know what they got going on, but all right, man.
Thanks a lot, man. Have a good night. Let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Again, the big winners today, Penn State, Texas, and Ohio State. The Big Ten wins 2 after losing 1 on Friday night. The SEC is 1-1. We got David Greenshield stopping by. David, how you doing?
I think this says it all, doesn't it, Mark?
That's it?
That's it, my friend.
Big block O.
Yes, OH, my friend. First of all, I'd like to say there was a caller that called into your show a few weeks ago after a certain game, berating a certain coach, as I seem to remember. I don't know if you remember who that guy was, but you know,
We'll let bygones be bygones.
but
There's a particular host that seems to be defending that coach from time to time.
yes, that host even made comparisons to men like Bobby Bodden and Tom Osborne in his infinite wisdom that day, which I found to be interesting. Some
Well,
actually found to be laughable, by the way, Mark.
we'll see how it plays out.
Yes, we shall. We shall see. All right. Well, on to it. I will say, I mean, could that be, bottom line, the best performance of the Ryan Day era?
Yeah, I guess it could be. I would think that this Tennessee team is in the same ballpark, though, as 2019 Wisconsin Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, there are similarities there. I could see that. I could see that.
You know, and when I say similarities, I mean more just level of play, not that they're the same type teams, but that's the first team that comes to mind as not being an elite team, but a really good team that they dismantled.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, I mean, I comped them to Penn State, which I think was, I said, maybe a poor man's Penn State, you know what I mean? But, I thought, I will say, I think Aller's ceiling as a passer, or he's more of an accurate down the field thrower than Nico is. I mean, you can see Nico still has some real work to do, by the way, as
Yes, he does.
as a passer, particularly down the field.
But he's where Aller was in 2022.
Yeah. Although I still think there were more glimpses of Aller even last year than maybe a little bit with Nico this year. I think Nico kind of gets by with his athleticism and him maybe making some plays off broken plays and getting outside the pocket a little bit. I think as far as being able to, and I thought Ohio State's game plan, I was going to say their defensive game plan, I'm going to get to their offensive game plan of trying to play off, make him read coverage and make plays from the pocket was, again, as much as, and we're going to get to Chip Kelly in a minute, but Jim Knowles, kudos as well, I think for a really good game plan. I will say, I correct me if I'm wrong, I think Dylan Sampson really, and I don't think it would have mattered, but a complete a non-factor in the game too, by the way, was obviously another death nail for them. I don't think it would have mattered anyway. I'll stipulate that, but
yeah, they had a lot of injuries during the course of the game, and Dylan Sampson would be the most notable. Now, the thing was as well, and I would love to see the all 22 tape to see this bear out, but it was like 35-10, and I'm saying to the people that I'm watching the game with, I said, has Tennessee taken any shots downfield? I'm not even talking about like go routes, shots down the field. I'm talking about just running intermediate routes. Everything was just dink and doink and screens. And Ian Malieva just running for his life, or just once they executed that one touchdown drive, which was mostly him running designed runs, some of it, they went with that design run more and more because that's about all they had.
Well, I think the other thing too that probably rendered their running game useless in this game was obviously Ohio State's start. Once Ohio State got off to that start, that was going to render their running game useless in any case. And
they were down 21-10 at half.
Well, well, that's true. I guess if you want to say they got back into it a little bit at the end of the half, but I do think when it was 21-0. Although I will say the Smith pass interference call should have been a pass interference call. Might have been a makeup call because I think there was a one on the down the sideline that could have caught Ohio State on before Ohio State got the ball back there at 21-0 and was driving for another score. Plus, I think it was borderline that guy got his toes down for the interception, I would say as well. Although I guess they couldn't overturn it. Maybe there just wasn't enough to overturn that interception.
Yeah, I was in the minority in the room. I thought that he intercepted the pass. Unfortunately, I thought that there was pass interference going on at the same time.
Right. Oh, he clearly grabbed Smith. No doubt about it. The real BS call was the roughing the passer. That was just a joke. That was just a joke. That was just an absolute joke and should have never have happened. That was horrible. That just shows you kind of what football's becoming in some ways the worst way in a lot of instances, Mark. But yeah, I wanted to get to the offense. By the way, I do want to respond to your largest fan base, if I may. One of the things that, and I know people they're saying that why didn't Tennessee maybe duplicate their game plan? I want to say a few things. Number one, I will say one of the things that the strength of Tennessee's is obviously their best player on their defensive line is an edge guy in Pierce. The strength of the team up north's D line is their tackles. It's not an edge guy. And that was another thing that kind of made me confident. The weakness of Ohio State was really the interior of its line, which obviously showed in the game. You know what I mean? Their guard and then having to replace Seth McLaughlin at center was really the questionable parts. Their tackles are actually fairly decent, even though they lost Simmons earlier in the year. Jackson's been at least serviceable at tackle, and Fryer's been at least serviceable at the other tackle position. So it gave me a little bit of hope that they could hold up against an edge guy as opposing to hold up in the middle against defensive tackles. I would stipulate that as well.
No, it's a astute point for sure. I thought the pass protection tonight was tremendous.
The other thing that I will that has to be say about the game against the Scumbags is Ohio State typically moves the ball, if you ever noticed, 20-20, but has a lot of mistakes inside the red area. And that's exactly what happened. Their kicker missed 2 field goals. Howard throws an interception inside the red area. So some of it, and I do think a lot of it was coaching, but a lot of it was just mistakes too. In one of those games where everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Well, when you're saying Ohio State not executing in the red zone, you're talking about specifically against Michigan, because when they entered that game, they were number 1 in the country in the red zone.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is that too. And by the way, worse teams than us threw the ball against their defense. It's not like you've created some incredible pass defense that nobody threw the ball against this year on. So, I mean, and that's why I go back to the coaching there too. And then Howard just being awful too in that game. And talk about a guy that made a complete about face. I mean, there were dimes out there today, Mark. There were dimes out there today. I mean, I always did feel that he throws a lot of the intermediate routes really accurately, like the slants, the crossers, even the deep out, stuff like this. It was always questionable about the long ball. And does he occasionally make that throw that he shouldn't make? We're always, I think, most Ohio State fans concerned about him over the course of the year.
Yeah, so he threw the first touchdown pass. That was a beautiful throw.
Yeah.
He threw the one, I'm trying to think who had a defender draped all over him that I think led to the second touchdown that got him down to about the 5-yard line. Now, that ball was actually a little bit underthrown, but it was still a good ball, but it wasn't picture perfect. But the best throw I thought he had was the first touchdown of the second half when he threw it to Jeremiah Smith in the corner.
Yep. The 35.
It was beautiful. It was perfect.
Yeah, the touchdown made it 28-10 to start the second half. Yeah, that was a dime. I do want to say kudos to Chip Kelly. I mean, if we're going to rip the guy for what he did for the play calling, what a bounce back. And I did think, one of the things I told you when we did evaluate this game is I did think that they could do some things through scheme to kind of, mitigate that Tennessee pass rush. Although, if you think about it, Mark, the offensive line just held up really well. They did do some things through play calling that I thought was really good to get the ball to their receivers. And, I also did, like I said, in watching Tennessee play 4 times this year, as I said, again, Carson Beck was playing like complete garbage. before he saw that Tennessee secondary and lit them up in Athens. So, I mean, you tell me, you know.
We also have to consider, going back to the combination of the play calling and the offensive line, that for Ohio State to be that confident, Day and Kelly in the offensive line, for them to call that many deep routes early in the game, you know, they must have seen something that made them think that that the offensive line was going to hold up, which they were right.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it had to be like screens, quick game, mesh routes, crossers, little wheel routes out of the backfield. I thought it had to be real quick. But there, you're right. There were even longer developing routes that they threw where the line held up really well. So, yeah, I think this is redemption to a certain extent. I mean, obviously to beat an SEC, but this was therapeutic. This team, this fan base, this coach, this with what happened, needed this in like the worst way.
Well stated. I think on all accounts, but there's still going to be grumblings. There's still going to be people that aren't satisfied. But for everyone, and then there's always the opposite end of the spectrum, the Pollyanna that says, you know, leave them alone. They're fine. Everything's great. They can't be perfect. But this middle portion of just high standard Ohio State standard fans that take the game seriously and take winning championships and expect the best, but aren't crazy ridiculous like there is no coming back and no return. Yes, redemption for the 80% of logical Ohio State fans. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I think Herbie, by the way, I don't know if you've heard Ohio State fans or not. Herbie is not in the best graces of Ohio State fans these days.
What has he done recently?
Well, I think his son just committed to a certain school.
Yeah,
I mean,
that. Okay, but he's got another son that's actually on the team.
Well, right, Mark. But you asked most Ohio. Here's the thing with Herbie. I during the game, and he uses the term lunatic fringe. I don't know if you heard that at the end of the game to describe a portion of the fan base. Listen, I get it. Fan is short for fanatic. It is not short for rational thinker, Mark. You know, I mean, I get it. You know, there's a lot of people out there. But let's be real, Mark. I mean, you know, Herbie lived through the rivalry through the 90s. I mean, he should know this better than anybody, how important this game is, Mark. I mean, Mark Rogers knew it when he was shaking a fist at a TV in 1976.
Thank you, David.
You know,
thank you for remembering that.
I was shaking a fist at a Zenith in 1986 when some jerk quarterback made a guarantee, Mark. I mean, it is what it is. It's a big freaking deal.
And Kirk Herbstreit's the one who was famously shot by cameras coming off the field when they tied Michigan, in tears. He was in tears because he wanted to beat Michigan so badly. That was the most important thing to him. And he was a senior and he was never going to beat Michigan.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, so for him to not, you know, I mean, say that, I think came across, I mean, he should have as good understanding of what this rivalry and what this game means to people. And when a guy loses 4 in a row in him, I mean, what do you expect? I mean, we understand the record is the record, but, you know, it upsets a lot of people, Mark, and it still upsets me. Listen, I want to be – I could chalk this year if they do go on to win it. Remember, 2017 Alabama. Who was their only loss to that year?
2017 Alabama?
Yeah.
Auburn.
Right. And they went on to win the national championship that year.
Yeah. It would have been an interesting experiment to have you sitting in with myself and my friends watching this game tonight, because I watched it with 4 other people and 2 diehard Ohio State fans. And even before the score got out of hand and Ohio State was clearly going to win this game, they don't understand and see where you're here on Ryan Day, and you're not to this end degree, but you're holding him accountable and certainly pissed off about what happened against Michigan and wanting a championship. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of like here, they're like here, like, what's all this crap about Ryan Day? He's doing a great job. He's 66-10. Leave him alone. What's the big deal? That's where they're at.
Well, remember, Mark, and this is what I said in the phone call. It's partly who he followed. Sometimes it's what you follow too.
And that was Herb Street's point. He also brought that in as well, that he followed the Urban Meyer Ohio State.
Well, bottom line, he followed. Right. He
Both
fired 2 of the 3 greatest coaches in the history of the school. I mean,
Yeah.
let's just be real. I mean, it's
and on top of that, their record against Michigan was almost flawless.
right. And they both did the same thing. They won a national championship and they won the most important game.
Yeah.
I mean, the only guy to ever do that, consistently was Woody. So I mean, sometimes it's also who you follow. Now, if Urban Meyer was gone and he was going 8-4 every year, and then you flip over to this, it's a different deal. But when you're handed one of the 2 or 3 best programs in the country, as I stipulated, and like I said, I mean, it's still not over yet. But, as I say, if they do get knocked out in the playoffs, they would be a 3-loss team this year. And that would be, a slow, steady decline a little bit there. So I'm not going to say that. And like I said, I've only seen 2 national championships in my lifetime. I'm not ready to crown anybody yet. But I will say that I said before this playoff started, I think he needs to – I'm like in between semis and championship game. I think if he can get at least to the championship game, I still would be – on board. Semis, possibly, but we got the toughest route to take.
Well, step 1 was tonight. The easiest step, but still, step 1 was tonight. And also understand, as we proceed in this 12-team playoff era, the records of the elite teams in the country is going to take a notch down.
Right. That's true. That's true. I mean, well, I will say this about the playoff games, Mark. The one team that I will say that didn't belong in my view is SMU. I think of all the teams that really, really didn't belong. Like you said, Indiana last night, it was like a slow burn. I mean, that game wasn't like a complete annihilation. I mean, and Notre Dame's not offensively kind of built that way anyway. It's not like the Riley Leonard passing game is going to be lighting you up for 5 or 6 touchdown passes a game or something. Let's be real. I mean, that's an offense built around the running game, and the quarterback hits some controlled passes, and that's pretty much it. And but I think Indiana kind of saw, and I will say this: the second half of the game against the team up north is probably where you kind of started to see their flaws. By the way.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's where we saw whatever adjustments, either Michigan made adjustments or they just broke into the game.
Right.
Yeah, Indiana hit a couple long passes early in the game to score 2 touchdowns. And after that, there was nothing. There was 18 yards of offense in the second half. They just couldn't handle Michigan's interior front or any portion of their defensive front. Rourke was under ambush in that game, similar to what he had to face against Ohio State, although the Buckeyes dialed up more blitzes to get home.
Right.
And Notre Dame did the same thing against him. And even when Rourke had, because a lot of people were obviously last night, I don't know if you heard any of the show, were comparing the Ohio State Indiana game to the Notre Dame Indiana game and thinking that the Notre Dame game performance was more impressive. And I got some of that. I understood it, that the game was more out of hand at halftime and more in Notre Dame's favor than 14-7, et cetera, et cetera. But Rourke, when he had time against Ohio State, he wasn't off in that game. He looked awful Friday night.
Yeah.
Against Ohio State, he was still the Curtis Rourke that carved up Nebraska and Washington and all these other teams. He just didn't have the time to throw most of the time.
Well, yeah, that's what I said to Jeffrey on that. He was on the Alabama chat. Is could they hold up in pass pro and could Rourke be on, and then run defense? Those were the three biggest keys to the game, and none of the three were there that night. I mean, was it your view, by the way, the bottom line of all the teams that got thumped here, and I wouldn't say that Clemson got thumped, but that really got beat in the four teams, that it was SMU that looked like the one that really didn't belong?
Yes, but that's not my assessment of SMU football to that extent. I'm not going to go to the nth degree, because how many times is Kevin Jennings going to throw the ball that horrifically?
Yeah.
He just
Yeah.
hasn't. And Penn State's offense didn't look that great. Did they need to look that great? Obviously not. And when you keep getting pick sixes, you're kicking the ball off. Their time of possession was way in the deficit, and their number of plays, because SMU was picking up a couple first downs and then committing turnovers, and Penn State was constantly scoring on defense. So Penn State really didn't have to do anything on offense. And again, Jennings was so bad. And a lot of that was Penn State created. Like, he was running for his life a lot, but on the balls that he threw away for those pick sixes, those were just horrendous decisions and poorly thrown passes.
Yeah, I expected the SMU a lot more out of the SMU offense, mainly because I did think Jennings was solid, and as I've said, I didn't think the Penn State defense is as good as it's been in the past, and I thought that they could move the ball a little bit on them. I thought they were just going to have a hard time stopping Penn State, but you're right. I mean, Penn State offensively was not necessarily lighting it up, but I don't know. I just always had my doubts whether SMU was one of the 12 best teams. I did think Tennessee was probably one of the 12 best teams, even though they got blown out. Clemson just happened to win their conference, which is obviously going to get them in. And then, with the situation with Indiana, I don't know if they're quite a top 12 team if I had to think about it. But what did you say, Mark? They're probably somewhere in the 15 to 20 range, probably,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. If I was going to get my 12 selection,
yeah.
And again, folks, this is not who I believe deserved. And I think those are two different arguments. And I'm okay with this current structure of teams earning, quote unquote, earning playoff spots with really good records or conference championships. I would take out, until further notice, we shall see next week against Texas, Arizona State's out of my top 12. Indiana's out. Boise State's out. SMU's out. And I would have said that even before they got blown out against Penn State. And in for me is Ole Miss, South Carolina, Alabama. And I guess I got to throw one more in there from somewhere.
What about
might be Miami, actually.
Could you make a case for Florida right now or South Carolina? Did you say something?
I threw in South Carolina.
South Carolina.
It might be Miami.
Could be. What about Illinois?
It might be Illinois. I was making the case last night that, because I don't know if you heard at the end of the Indiana Notre Dame game, Sean McDonough was making, and I love Sean McDonough. I think he's one of the very best play-by-play guys in college football.
Right.
But he tends to go on his soapbox more than most play-by-play guys.
He does, yeah.
Play guys they stay in their lane and they let the analysts take on the sport. And he went on his rant about, well, this gives us indication that even though the Big Ten is supposed to be on par with the SEC and they would like to think of themselves as such, that the Big Ten really may not belong. And this is kind of an indicator that the Big Ten doesn't belong and there's really the league's overrated. And he went on this whole spiel. I'm thinking, can you let the rest of the weekend play out before you judge Indiana, which, if you know what truly happened this season, forget the record. We could have trotted out Iowa. We could have sent them to South Bend on Friday night, and they probably would have played at least as good a game as Indiana. Like, Indiana is not necessarily the fourth best team in the Big Ten.
No, no. I mean, everybody knows. You know, what's interesting in that game? I don't know if you heard that commentary where they had said that the coach's wife was talking to Cignetti about taking the job, and one of the first things Cignetti looked at was Indiana's schedule in the
Yeah.
upcoming season to see, oh, well, maybe this is a good job now that I look at the schedule. You know,
I found that very odd that a coach would be that invested in the schedule and that they would be that short-sighted in taking a job.
Well, I mean, listen, I mean, you got to get that security and get some wins under your belt. That's the
Yeah.
only thing that helps with the
Mhm.
contract and, staying employed, by the way, Mark. I mean, my thing is next year, I've always said, and I've said it from the get-go, let's see them I won't say duplicate it. They're not going to go 11-1, but I think what I said is what I said. If they win 11 games this year and he wins at least, what did you say, 7, 8 would be reasonable next year, Mark?
Oh,
Th-
well, they've got 3 gimmies in the non-conference.
Well, some of the James Madison transfers are going to be out the door, right, Mark?
No, I mean they've got 3 high school teams, just
Oh,
like
yeah.
this year that they're playing in non-conference play.
Right. Yeah. And then I will start to maybe get on the Cignetti train, just, bottom line. But yeah, I mean, I will say Clemson was a lot more competitive than I thought they would be in a game that I thought was just going to be ugly. Are we to make it that maybe Texas has found some offense?
Yeah, they sure did. But Clemson's defense is not vintage or even a normal Clemson defense. This Clemson team, I am happily surprised that we got at least a good game out of them to at least entertain. I'll speak for myself. I was the most entertained watching, other than my fandom, watching Ohio State just truck Tennessee. Of course, that was highly enjoyable.
Right.
But in terms of football entertainment, even though Clemson never really scared Texas, they stayed in contact with them because they threw the ball around, and that Clemson wide receiver core that I've bashed in recent years. But I did make the comment to you the other night that it is much improved this year, but I thought it showed that it was even much more improved than I gave it credit for. And that's what kept Clemson in the game, was Klubnik throwing to 2 or 3 wide receivers. Other than that, they had nothing.
Well, yeah, that was the thing, though, is I wondered if the Texas front seven, which is really, really good, would just dominate the game. My only thing was I just thought it was going to be super low scoring because we've seen nothing out of Texas's offense. Although SEC people are just going to say, well, they had to go against SEC defenses. That's why they're. Although, needless to say, we saw an SEC defense get shredded in Columbus, but I digress.
And we saw this SEC defense, Texas, give up well over 350 yards. They had come into the game as the only defense in America that had never given up 350 yards this season in a game. And I think Clemson was well on its way to 500 yards.
Yeah, they moved the ball a lot, but it shows me for betting the under.
I would have been right there with you, probably.
Yeah. What do you think about the quarters? Do you think it's just really the 2 games that are the ones that are people just going to be eyeballing, the Rose and then the Sugar, Mark?
Sure. Those are by far the marquee matchups and the expected national title contenders facing each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to think so. I mean, Franklin's path to the semis continues. See, I wanted to think Arizona State has a shot against Texas, but if Texas has kind of found their offense even just a little bit, I think that game could get ugly.
Yeah, I think it could as well. I just don't think Arizona State has that high level of talent, and Texas's defense, even though Clemson found some things today, is so good.
Yeah.
Cam Scattaboo is not going to run through the Texas defense like it's Iowa State.
Yeah, I can't see Scattaboo having a huge day running the ball. I think Penn State's also going to zero in. Scattaboo and Genty, will be marked people in both those games, by the way. I actually do think ND has a shot against Georgia. I legitimately do. I mean, let's see what Stockton can do, because I think that Notre Dame defense is legit. My problem is when your offense is built around a run game and you go up against Georgia's defense, lots of luck. Lots of luck.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Anything else, David?
No, that's all right, Mark. Hey, OH, and I will. Oh, you're doing the call-in show in the morning tomorrow?
I believe we will. Yeah, why not?
All right. Well, hey, at least I got the Buckeyes because I'd rather be talking college football than worrying about the Browns tomorrow. That's for sure.
All right. Do they have a bye week?
No, they got Joe Burrow tomorrow.
Okay.
Good luck with
All
that
right.
one.
Well,
Take care,
enjoy.
Mark.
All right, David. Thanks.
Mhm.
All right, let's keep it moving. I am quite amused by all the SEC hate and joking, but that's certainly. Hey, tonight is the night to jump on that, even though Texas won a playoff game. All right, welcome in the Voice of College Football. We got Porter on the line.
This is very timely, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm just looking at the last maybe 50 comments in the chat, and people are yucking it up about the demise of the SEC.
Well, let me dispel something about us in the South. As an alum of a SEC institution, I rooted against Texas today. I rooted against Tennessee today. I love watching them get destroyed up in Columbus. Not all of us root for our fellow conference rivals. And I'll be honest with you, I don't understand why people do that. I know it's something that has been in vogue since I don't know, the BCS era. I don't know why we kind of gravitated to that.
Way before that.
But let me just say something right now. I mean, we've won at the University of Georgia. We won 15 SEC championships. And we fly 15 SEC championship flags at San Francisco, or we will when we raise the next one next fall. We fly 15 SEC championship flags at Sanford Stadium. We're going to fly, or we fly 4 national championship flags at the Sanford Stadium. We don't fly a flag that says we play in the toughest conference in the nation. I don't. Where do you put that flag, Mark?
Is that the one you plant in the middle of the field when you go beat one of your rivals, I guess?
I don't understand the interest in, and this could be for Big Ten people too, and this could be for SEC or whatever. You don't fly a flag. You don't put a trophy together because you play in the toughest conference in the nation. That's all I care about. All I care about are our banners and championships. And whether or not we play in the toughest conference in America, I couldn't give a rat's rear, to be honest with you. I just want to win championships. And so let me dispel that right now. I know Alabama fans are kind of like me in that I know Alabama roots against us all the time when we get to the national stage. I know our rivals like Florida do too. So I think it's the SEC fans that are kind of at the top, whose programs are kind of at the top, who understand what the bottom line is. I think it's the fans of the Ole Misses and the Mississippi States and the South Carolinas that constantly beat their chest about the SEC being the top conference. People like Georgia fans, Alabama fans, we don't care about that crap. And I hate to generalize because I can't generalize because I'll see some idiot, in our stands, talking about the SEC and all this other stuff, but I'm not that way. And I'll just go ahead and tell you right now. And those my friends that are in the chat, you should know that by now. I'm not that way.
So I can't dispute any of that. It sounds reasonable and it sounds fairly accurate with what I've encountered and experienced. I know that when I went to the state of Mississippi and was a sportscaster there for 7 years and covered Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama, those were the 3 schools I covered because of where we were located, that Yes. So, for example, Mississippi State went to the Final Four in basketball in 1996, and I traveled the whole route. And along the way, they beat higher ranked teams like UConn and Cincinnati, and there would be SEC chants that would break out in the stands frequently. And that's from Mississippi State, a school that in the major sports, especially football, has basically accomplished next to nothing historically. So you may be right. But I'm glad that you put in the exception that there are exceptions, but generally it sounds like what you are framing is correct.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to say that out because I know this whole all the calls are all very anti-SEC, and I'm like, well, you know what? For someone who went to an SEC school, I just want to say it. You can badmouth my conference all you want. I really couldn't give a care. I don't really care.
Well, I will clarify this, and correct me if I'm wrong, because we certainly have spent hours and hours discussing college football, and usually from a macro standpoint, usually a lot of discussions we've had have dealt with the history and conference strength and so forth. And you do defend the SEC's record, correct?
Who, me, or
Yes.
just in general?
Yes, we have been in discussions where you have, and again, I'm not saying that you're doing it from the standpoint of saying that you rooted for all these bowl game victories and so forth and championships from other schools, but you have defended the league's stature against other leagues.
Yeah, I may have on a call or two, but but I seem to do that more as a defending someone's schedule more than anything, or defending our place in the BCS era, our place in the playoff era. But yeah, I mean, in the off season, I'll be the first to, look back at what has happened in the last 20 years and say, what the SEC has done has been impressive. But I tell you right now, I have, like last year when Bama played Michigan, I was the biggest Michigan fan you've ever seen. When Auburn played Oregon, I was big time on wanting Oregon to beat Auburn. I hate every other team in my conference, and I'm not going to root for them to have success at the expense of my alma mater. So, I just, it's one of those things. I'm not going to rah root for someone in my conference if it's going to hurt me in recruiting. It's going to hurt me in, mainly recruiting or prestige or, the hierarchy of my conference. I'm not going to root for, I'm not going to root for, if we happen to lose to Notre Dame, I'm not going to root for Texas to take it home for the SEC. I'm just not that way. I mean, I don't like the other teams in my conference, and I love seeing what Ohio's. I was sitting on my couch with my wife, and she was kind of didn't know who to root for tonight. And I was just like, man, we hate Tennessee. Why would we root for Tennessee? And it's like, I loved it when Ohio State was throwing those beautiful dimes to those great receivers. And I was like, bring it on, man. I mean, Tennessee is the biggest trash talking, never to have done anything since the Clinton administration program you will ever see. They're the worst. Why would I ever root for those people? They haven't done anything since the Clinton administration. Think about that, Mark. They've not won an SEC or national championship since 1998. But yet they carry themselves like the freaking Southern Cal of the 2000s. I mean, it's just like I'm not going to root for someone like that. So anyway, my point is the whole thing about this. I'm just a bottom line kind of guy. I just want to win championships. And whether I play in the strongest conference or not, I really couldn't care.
All right.
You there?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
let me on the flip side of that, let me throw something out to the Ohio State fans on this chat, because Ohio State has a tremendous tradition of winning and championships. And I understand, and I'm sure people are going to roll their eyes out there and go, well, you Southern boy don't understand the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry and all this other stuff. Let me take what I'm saying in a different, let me take a variation of what I'm saying. When you beat Ohio State, the last, I don't know, 25 years, you've won like, I don't know, 17 out of 25 or something like that. I mean, something outrageous. Do you put a banner up every time you beat Michigan?
No, there was no banner.
Is there a parade?
At the stadium.
Is there a parade? Is
No.
there a documentary of every time you beat Michigan? But there is every time you win a national championship, right?
Yes.
You people have a chance to win a national championship. And all you people that are sitting around going, well, we didn't beat Michigan. Who freaking cares? You have a wonderful tradition and you have a wonderful opportunity to win a national championship. Who freaking cares if you won that game? You don't hang banners because you beat Michigan in 19, whatever it was. You hang banners because you won national championships or Big Ten championships. Get over it. You have a wonderful program and you have a wonderful coach. And if you can't see it, you're so freaking stupid. I don't even know. I can't even talk to you. You have a coach that has multiple playoff wins now. How many coaches out there have multiple playoff wins? Not many. And you know what? You got 2 wins since Dabo has his last win. You beat Dabo in the Sugar Bowl and you won tonight. Dabo has not won a playoff game since. But yet Dabo is considered one of the best coaches in America. Wake up, Ohio State, and appreciate what you have. All right.
It's well said.
I'm going to bed, my man. Have a great Christmas. I probably won't call you back for a week or so, but God bless.
Merry Christmas to you, Porter. God bless, and I appreciate you calling. Wow. Okay. There's some perspective from the SEC, from a Georgia fan, from our buddy Porter, speaking to Buckeye Nation. I could counter that with a differing viewpoint to a certain extent. I definitely get his point, and that's the logical point. But again, he said it very well overall, but he also got to the heart of the matter when he said an Ohio State fan would say, you don't understand. And I am as removed from the rivalry as I have ever been in my life, but I still consider that to be the most important game of the year. But I am more emotionally removed from that. Like this last season's loss impacted me far less than any other. And so it has diminishing returns, especially in this 12-team playoff era. All right, we got Buckeye Mike. We got the real MVP. So let's get to these calls. Buckeye Mike, what's going on?
Oh, my goodness, Mark. Oh, my goodness. Porter is a freaking genius and needs to be a preacher. Because here's the thing. He is completely right. I'm going to touch on this, and then I'm going to get to the real talk here. He is completely right when it comes to Michigan. Because we can lose that game, winning a national championship, in my opinion, is the biggest goal out there for everybody. So that's more important. Porter said a lot of honest things that I completely agree with. And yes, I love that W. I say this because, oh my gosh, Instagram and Twitter are just filled with the freaking Michigan fans. They're like, oh, if Ohio State wins the national title, it's tainted because they lost to Michigan. Go win 10 games and get in the playoff. That's all I'm going to say about that. So, Ohio State, Tennessee. Nico was coming into this game, was praised because he virtually single-handedly beat Alabama. He didn't show up. Granted, he was rattled. And here's the thing, too. I felt like that major hit that he took, I felt from Cody Simon, I felt could have been a targeting because he was wrapped up by a defender and he was defenseless because he couldn't protect himself. And he took a big hit in the neck and head area. For SMU Penn State, I can see where you feel like, SMU probably shouldn't have been in, but they did what they needed to do more or less to be in the position to get in, which is the same thing Ohio State was in. Because I have a family member that is on the SMU staff, I hope that these boys keep their heads up because they did very good. And because of Penn State's path being so easy and Penn State having won this game, when will the people give James Franklin a signature win? I feel like because this was a playoff game, it was a top 12, top 15 win in all technicality. It is a signature win, in my opinion. As far as Friday night or last night, my biggest thing was Cignetti was humbled, and I love how Cignetti had the conversation with Nick Saban when Nick told him on game day, your quote-unquote trash talking is not what you got from me. That's one thing that's different between us. And he's completely right when Nick Saban said basically the same stuff that Porter said. The fan base needs to enjoy the ride, and you can still win a national championship. He even said there were times that he had seasons like Ohio State had this year, and they still were in contention, and the pressure was on. And the biggest thing too, because for some reason social media loved to blow it up. Ohio State Tennessee was the only game that Lane Kiffin was extremely quiet. I find that interesting because it was all Bama, Ole Miss, South Carolina should be in, and you really put these guys in over all of these teams, and nothing after the kickoff of Ohio State Tennessee.
Well, Mike, I got to say that you came with a tremendous call here tonight. You just nailed it on all points. So I'm right there with you that the sanctity, the sacred nature of the Ohio State-Michigan game cannot be challenged. And what is important to any particular sports fan is what is important to them, and it can't be argued. If that is what is held most cherished to a particular fan base, a Michigan fan, an Ohio State fan, then so be it. But yes, if you're going to live in a world where once that game is lost, and especially now that we have a playoff, we've had one for 10 years, and now we have an expanded playoff, that nothing else can make you happy or satisfied or bring you to a place where you're happy about the accomplishments of your team, then I don't really want to live like that, where your year is ruined and you can't be happy about beating four of the best teams in the country in a row in winning a national championship. And like you say, there's ample opportunity for Michigan to have made the playoff this year, that they weren't good enough. They were good enough on one day, and congratulations to them. They won the game, the greatest rivalry in college football and arguably in sports. They won that game, but overall, Ohio State is a better football team, a better program, and accomplished more this year, and they are still playing for a championship. Now, we don't know where it's going to end or where it's going to go from here, but yeah, I think you can still live in a place where you're disappointed that your team lost its biggest rivalry game, and therefore you don't have bragging rights there, but you can then get over that to a certain extent and say, our team's still alive. We can still go on and achieve great goals and still finish this season as the number one team in college football.
Yeah, and it just blows my mind. Like, that's the one part about being a Ohio State fan I don't like, is that small, as Kirk Herbstreit has pointed out multiple times, that small 15 to 20% that is just, like you said, so extreme. Like, oh, got to go undefeated, got to beat Michigan, got to do this, got to do that, or the coach stinks, fire the coach. Ryan Day is a very winning coach. And now, yes, he hasn't won a national championship yet. It took Kirby Smart 6 years to win a title. Nick Saban 9 years to win a title as a head coach. So it does take time. And the one thing I forgot to ask you about with Ohio State, Tennessee, because I couldn't figure out what I meant when I wrote it down. Do you think Ryan took too long to sub his rotations out? You think he should have started subbing sooner than he did?
Well, before I'll answer that, just to extend on your point, and it's a well put one about Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, is that, I brought those two guys are obviously legends, and Saban's arguably the greatest of all time. I brought up the case of going back further in time, Tom Osborne at Nebraska and Florida State and Bobby Bowden, where those guys, they had each two of the greatest resumes in college football during the 80s and 90s. And they continually lost the most devastating game year after year after year after year. And Tom Osborne started in Nebraska in 1973. And he first won a national championship in 1994, 21 years later. And if you ask any college football fan that knows anything about the history of the game, and you put down the name Tom Osborne, they basically fall to their knees in worship. Like, he's got 3 national championships. He's considered one of the greatest of all time. It took him 21 freaking years. And it wasn't like he took over some haphazard program. He took over a blue blood that was a great program. And he kept having Oklahoma push him down year after year. Barry Switzer couldn't get past them, kept losing bowl games. They cost them national championships. Took him 21 years. Bobby Bowden, yes, he did a phenomenal job building Florida State to be where it is. But they got to where they are back in 1979 and were playing for national championships in 1979 and 80. It took him until 1993 to break through the door and win a national championship. If the mentality of most of these fans would have been applied to those guys, we would have never found out that they would become all-time great coaches, because they would have been fired.
Oh, yeah.
To your point about Ohio State and Tennessee and getting the frontline players out of the game earlier, I think that would have been more important had there been a game that wasn't 10 or 11 days away, but only a week away. That's the only thing I'll say about that.
So basically, because that's like the one thing my grandma kept saying, why won't he pull his players? The game's in hand. It's over. He needs to pull his guys. Well, like you said, the next game is, basically a week and a half, 2 weeks away. So, I mean, and here's the thing too. All 4 quarterbacks still on the roster got to see some playing time. Devin Brown played. Julian Sayin, the 2025 starting quarterback, played. Lincoln Keenholz played. So, I mean, yes, he rotated everybody in, basically. And so what if it's quote-unquote pat statting? Or stat padding. Yeah, my bad. So I'm going to loop back because I think this was like the only thing left you didn't really answer. So even though James Franklin has now won a top 12 matchup, what do you think it would take for James Franklin to stop receiving the quote-unquote Ryan Day treatment from the national media about he can't win a big game?
Yeah. So first off, to compare James Franklin and Ryan Day and what they've accomplished is a joke. So
Yeah.
to your point, Franklin gets the Ryan Day treatment, but we should all understand, let's make it very clear, those are on 2 very different levels.
Yeah.
James Franklin has never coached a team that stepped on the field in a national championship game. He's never coached a team that has stepped on a field against the likes of the 2019 Clemson team or the 2020 Clemson team, or again, the national championship game against Bama, or performed to the extent that the team did in 2022 against Georgia, a team that was about to win the national title by 58 points. So the 2 levels of those levels of play, Ohio State under Ryan Day and James Franklin's Penn State teams, are just completely, they're like top 3 in the country versus like top 10 to 12 in the country. So just to make that clear. So to me, the thing about Penn State is, so Penn State made the playoff this year. Finally, Penn State has made the playoff. They would have made the playoff 6 times in 10 years if there was a 12-team playoff. But so now the school that would have been the biggest beneficiary of a 12-team playoff got their 12-team playoff, and they made the playoff. Congratulations. And so they get to play SMU, and they get to play them at home, and they kill them by 28 points. And I would go beyond saying that Penn State did what you would expect them to do. They did much more than that. You know, had they won that game 31-20, I'd be saying, okay, that's fine. They beat Penn State by 10 or 11 points, and they were supposed to win, according to Vegas, by 8. That's an okay win. They'll move on to the next round. But they annihilated SMU. So good win for Penn State. Now, is that a signature win? I do not consider that a signature win. SMU would go 5-4 or 6-3 in the Big Ten.
Conference record wise?
That would be their conference record in the Big Ten.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I just feel like, sorry to cut you off. I just feel like for people to, and maybe that's just the way it is with most big programs. I mean, I feel like if I remember correctly, Kirby got this kind of heat in a way when he started at Georgia. I think James Franklin's just going to have to figure out a way to win the whole thing. And in some ways, he's lined up, his path is lined up to at least get there. Because here's the thing. We don't know how Georgia really looks. I think Notre Dame really could beat Georgia. Now, I'm not saying they will. I'm likely going to pick Georgia to still win. But because we don't really know a whole lot, and it only takes 1 or 2 good cracks at Gunnar Stockton for him to look loopy, they could do it. But we'll never know.
Meaning we'll never know if Notre Dame would beat Georgia with Carson Beck.
I mean, we won't know for sure until the game happens. My bad. We'll never know.
Yeah, of course. Notre Dame has a legitimate shot to win this game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially with the way they looked against Indiana, because I mean, yeah, Indiana got lucky and got 14 points at the end of the game, but I mean, it was garbage time
Oh,
points. And I
yes.
know you probably don't like that term, but I mean, that's literally
Oh,
what it was.
absolutely. I
The
like
game
that.
was in hand.
No, I am
Oh, you do?
very much in favor of the term garbage time. Those points, they count. They're on the scoreboard. They're in the record
Mhm.
books. But I actually got on here because I was preparing to come on, and I actually put on the banner 27-11 because I was getting ready and it was 27-3, and then I still had the game on so I could hear it. And boom, I hear that they scored a touchdown. Okay, it's 27-11. I actually had to change my banner as 27-3. I didn't even realize that Indiana scored another touchdown that was worthless and that it was 27-17. The real
Mhm.
MVP actually had to let me know. And it was 27-17. And I'm like, okay, for anybody, and this is where I said Kurt Signetti actually got his wish. When he punted with 10 minutes left in the game, when it was 20-3,
Mhm.
he should not have been punting. He should have been going
Mhm.
for it on fourth down if he would
Yeah.
have had the guts and been thinking, I still want to win this football game. We are here to win, not to not be embarrassed. But
Yeah.
no, he took the tact that, no, I want to punt because I don't want to get blown out and make it look bad. That he got his wish because at the end of the game, his team scored 14 meaningless points that meant absolutely nothing and
Mhm.
made it look good. And 5-10 years from now, there are going to be people looking in a record book saying, Indiana, oh, Indiana made the college football playoff. Oh, they actually played Notre Dame pretty close. It was a decent game, 27-17, when it wasn't a decent game.
No, and that's the funny thing too, because it's like, okay, basically when they went for that second 2-point conversion and failed, that's when I knew, okay, the game is over. Because they're literally like 2 plays away from possibly making the game go to overtime, and they literally barely played 59 minutes of the game. Because if they convert that second 2-point conversion, that would have made it 27-19. Do a miraculous onside kick yet again, recover it, and then drive down and score again. I mean, I know, like you said, it is garbage time points because once you start listing more and more things that they need to do, you got to look at how much time was left. There was virtually no chance. But that right there, when they didn't make the second 2-pointer, that's when I really knew, like, okay, this thing is over. I knew long before then, but then they just randomly woke up with like a minute to go.
Exactly. All right, Mike. Anything else tonight?
Just if you haven't already, pre-order the book or buy the book, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let's keep pushing this thing to 100,000 subs.
Thank you, Mike. I
By the way,
appreciate all that.
I meant to ask you, where roughly are you currently sitting at? Are you still sitting around like 950 or whatever?
950 what?
I mean, 95,000 or something. Where are you for your subs? Where are you roughly sitting
Oh,
at?
nowhere near 95,000, like 46,000.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, let's push to 50,000 so we can truck along to 100,000.
Okay. All right.
Have a
Thanks
good
for
night,
calling,
Mark.
Mike. I appreciate it.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. And again, Merry Christmas to everyone. And if you in some way celebrate something else, happy holidays. But Merry Christmas to everyone. Appreciate you being here. All right. Yes, Disputed National Champions. I believe you'll love this book. Every feedback we've gotten so far, every review has been outstanding. So I thank you for all the people who have commented back about our book, Disputed National Champions. The link is in the description section of the video, or again, you can just go on Amazon and look up Disputed National Champions. Let me pick off these super chats. We've got Brian, who said, okay, when David called and said, this is the most impressive Ohio State win under Ryan Day since, we did not take into account the Clemson win in 2020. That was 49-28. And of course, Clemson was coming off a long run of playoff appearances and national championships. Then we've got Terrence. Most SEC fans don't respect the Big Ten. Well, I've not taken a poll, but I'll take your word for it, and I would not be surprised if you are correct. All right, DeReal MVP stopping by.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm surprised by the reaction, and that's off-putting to me because I thought it would be one storyline, but it seems like the New England Patriots system has hit the SEC where everybody just hates us to hate us. So, I mean, is anybody surprised by this outcome of the game? The only reason I thought it might possibly be close is because of the Ohio State mental factor of getting destroyed and humiliated by Michigan. But if Ohio State and Tennessee played at their best, this outcome was inevitable. Inevitable. Ohio State is way more talented than Tennessee in all aspects of the game. I mean, to me, the storyline should be the 12-team playoff is a complete and utter failure. And the idea of treating all conferences equal is stupid, and we should never do it again. Because there was only been one lead change so far in the 4 games. None of these games were exciting. None of these games were watchable. Honestly, I was like, had halftime in all these games. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to find something to do till the next game. It was just complete drubbing all day.
Okay. For the first point, I would say that this outcome by Ohio State is a bit on the high end of what I expected, but still, I thought it was more than possible. Possible means like 1 out of 100 shot. And I wouldn't say probable. I would say that I thought it was somewhat likely that Ohio State would blow out Tennessee. But similar to you, and we discussed the game a few times, I thought Ohio State's psyche would get in the way and make it a close game, and that they would. I picked Ohio State to win a close game. But this does not surprise me. In terms of the 12-team playoff, again, I want to see at least a full season play out. And I know that we have gotten through the first round games, and basically it was a disaster. The only thing that made it interesting was we got to see something we've never seen before. We got to see on-campus playoff games. So just the sight of it and the spectacle was interesting, but the games were not good. None of them. The Clemson-Texas game was somewhat interesting. At no point did I think that Texas was in trouble, but it was entertaining and interesting to a certain extent. And again, much of that just had to be the fact that Clemson and Texas were on the same field together for the first time ever, and they were playing in Austin, Texas. That made it interesting to me. But the games were not good. You're correct. And the 12 best teams in America are not playing in the playoff.
Right. And people saying that Tennessee is the 3rd best SEC team and Ohio State is like the 4th best Big Ten team. I'm sorry, but we can't go by the standings because of the schedule disparity. This is arguably the best team in the Big Ten. At worst, the 2nd best team in the Big Ten, playing the 5th best SEC team. I mean, the disparity in talent alone and coaching and everything between these two teams. And this is what I've been saying for a year, 2 years now. If we expand the playoffs, we're going to have results like this. I mean, I didn't have Tennessee winning a game. I didn't think Tennessee had a really realistic chance. But why do you think there's just so much pressure that every SEC team has to win every single game, Mark? And if they lose a single game against anybody, they're terrible.
Because the SEC has ruled the sport for at least 15 years, and therefore anyone with any opposite rooting interest that is not a logical or rational or fair-minded person, and even if they are, they're going to kind of suppress that, and they're going to act on their instincts and act on their emotions to take advantage of, because it's happened so few times, to take advantage of the opportunity that somebody And in this case, a Big Ten team, which has not happened much in the college football playoff era, a Big Ten team beat down an SEC team. So they're going to take advantage of that. And we saw all sorts of comments scrolling by. I wish I would have taken advantage of a lot of them that were utterly ridiculous about how bad the SEC
Well,
is.
there's still plenty more coming through right now. People are arguing that Tennessee isn't the 5th best SEC team. Mark, could you rank the SEC teams right now and say where you would have them at?
Okay, DeReal, I would take exception here to a certain extent. Your outline on the Big Ten is much easier to rank. It is just clear either Oregon's the best, and by definition of and framework of their win over Ohio State and their undefeated record, as of right now, until we see on New Year's Day, we would have to rank them number 1. And Ohio State, again, forget what the standings say. Ohio State finished behind Indiana in the standings. We know Ohio State is at least the second best team in the conference. And then Penn State would be next. And then whatever, it doesn't matter. Indiana, I guess. Maybe Iowa's as good as Indiana. Who knows? But it's the tiers are rather distinguishable.
Yeah, they're
and
set.
Clear. Yes.
And they've been set for like 10 years now.
Well, for most of the last 10 years, it's been Ohio State better than everybody else. And then Michigan jumped up 3 years ago. That's basically the story of the Big Ten over the last 10 years. Plus, the story of the Big Ten in the last 20 some years has been Ohio State's been better than everybody else.
Right. And to the answer that guy's super chat, why don't people in the SEC respect the Big Ten? You've got one team that actually can win in most years. That's it. There's no Maryland's, Iowa's, Wisconsin, Illinois that even have a chance. Whereas in the SEC, Florida's won it within the last 15, 16 years. Auburn's won it. Georgia's won it. Alabama's won it. LSU's won it. The SEC's just had so many different teams winning compared to the Big Ten. That's why.
Yeah, that is all true. Okay, so the Big Ten, I think you have defined very clearly, and I think it's not very arguable, that point. Once we transition to the SEC, okay, who's the best team in the SEC? I guess it's Georgia because they won the 2 games against Texas. Other than that, I think that Texas is right there. So it's Texas and Georgia in some order. And then after that, I have a difficult time separating these teams. I guess I would actually put Ole Miss next, most likely, but I think that there's this bunch of teams between Ole Miss, Alabama, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Those 4 would be next in some order, and maybe you could even latch Texas A&M onto that kind of on the low end. So that's why I just say I can't say that Tennessee's the 5th best team in the Big Ten. I know that they're no better than the 3rd best team in the Big Ten, and they might, or the SEC, but they might be like the 6th or 7th best team in the SEC. They're in that bunch.
Right. We can't just look at schedules or the standings anymore and be like, well, they finished 3rd in the SEC, therefore they're the 3rd SEC team. It's just too much disparity this year. I mean, Indiana is the perfect example of it. They're clearly not where they are in the standings. Honestly, I honestly believe Florida, USC, and those type of teams can beat them. If USC played Indiana next week, I believe USC wins that game with Zachariah Branch, Miller Moss, and all of them, or that new backup quarterback they have in there. I think they're that good. And Indiana's that untalented and that bad. I think we need to get away from this. You are what your record says you are, and I'm hoping this playoff results today show it. I'm sorry to offend people by saying this. Yes, Alabama at 9-3 is unequivocally better than an 11-1 an ACC team. Yes, a 9-3 Big Ten team like a USC and like a Michigan should be in the playoff over a 11-1 Big 12 and ACC team. Sorry if that offends you. This isn't the NFL. We are not designed by parity. I want the best teams in the playoff. I want teams that can be competitive and teams that can win the national championships. And those teams have the talent and depth required to win it. SMU, Indiana, and these poverty-level programs do not have the talent to do it. And I guess next week we're going to have to see 2 more instances of this when Arizona State gets their butt whooped and Boise State gets handled.
Somebody in the chat just said that Mark hates Penn State. I don't know where that comes from. Anyway, again, you and I kind of differ on this because I think we both agree. We both have the same outlook of what reality is and what the quality of these teams, their programs, and these conferences are. But I do not want to go into some kind of silo where we have the SEC and the Big Ten and all of their teams playing for a national championship.
I don't think it's best for the sport. I don't think it's the healthiest thing, but that's what the players want. That's what the money wants, and that's what the recruits want it. I can't tell a recruit, hey, you have to go to Arizona State. You have to go to Baylor. If we could do that, then I'd be on board with you. But instead, we're going to see 58-0 games. If you look at the 2025 recruiting rankings, the top 14 is from the SEC and Big Ten. All the players are telling you, I want to play for these tough schools. I want to play for these 2 conferences. And I recognize that. I'm sorry it's the way the sport's going, but I can't undo and unwind the clock. If we had a college football commissioner that was a hierarchy of the sport that can set a vision, then sure, I'd be more inclined for that direction. But unfortunately, we don't. And if you want to have it every single year where we see these beatdowns over and over and over again, then that's fine. But eventually people are going to be tuning out of this stuff. Because I guarantee the casual fan, first off, having to find these games on TNT, the biggest winner of this today was ESPN. I know everybody hates ESPN, but let's talk about their galaxy brain move of sublicing these trash games to TNT to where nobody would watch them, and then they only get the big game that everybody was talking about. That was a genius move by ESPN to have the foresight and knowledge to do that. I mean, congratulations to them. They're the biggest winner in all of this.
I guess I've got to be apologizing, according to Keep Choppin', to Penn State because I didn't differentiate the entire records, winning percentage, championship breakdown. I didn't spend like 28 minutes doing that, explaining. Keep chopping. Believe me, I know the history of the Big Ten. I know everybody's records from the last 20 years. Sorry, I did not cite the 3 times that Penn State won Big Ten titles in the last 20 some years. It's been not really that significant. Okay, great. Yes, just because I said it's Ohio State and everybody else, it has been Ohio State and everybody else. That doesn't mean every single season it's only been Ohio State. But Ohio State has a clear disparity in their winning percentage against everybody else in the Big Ten than any other team does against its conference than anybody in the country by far. That's what I'm talking about. Just because Penn State won a Big Ten title shared in 2005 and 08 and 16, congratulations. Okay. They're a second-class citizen to Ohio State. It's not close. They've lost 13 of the last 14 times they've played. We're not talking about schools and football programs that are on the same level. Penn State is really good. They're not Ohio State. Sorry. Come on here and argue with me. All right. Back to our discussion, DeReal. I don't know what else to tell you.
I like you just put these people down in their place, these people that don't understand the pecking order of this sport and the way it is. Listen, people call it SEC homerism. I call it fact-based intellectualism, Mark. I mean, it's just ridiculous. This is another idea that bothers me. Well, every sport has blowouts, Mark. Does every game is a blow in every sport? Imagine watching the NBA and every game's 115-79. How many people do you think would watch it for very long if every game was like that? I mean, part of sports and what makes them interesting is there's competition. There's a competitive aspect. There's some drama of who we think can win the game and who can lose the game. There's no drama. I mean, instantly filling out the bracket, when I called you, I said, hey, Texas has got the easiest path. Georgia's got the easiest path in the national championship. And I said, well, we know based on the path Penn State is automatically going to the semifinals. There's no drama in this playoff. There's no drama in the format. It's complete garbage. And I just pray that we change the system for next year. At least fix the seeding. Can we all at least agree on this? I know we're completely divided all in our silos. Can we at least say the seeding needs to go and just you can have an automatic qualifier bid, but Arizona State would be 11 and Boise State would be like 9 and whatnot. Can we at least do that, Mark?
Well, we can do that. Yes, something needs to be addressed about the obvious disparity in paths to the national championship game and how lower seeds have better paths clearly than higher seeds, albeit, yes, the number 1 seed in the whole tournament. But now that we're through this first round, you don't find these next round of games to be interesting?
2 of them are going to be complete blowouts. One of them has a chance to be interesting, and one of them is going to be an all-time classic, is the way I see it. The 2 blowouts is Arizona State, Texas. Texas should just roll them like they did against Clemson, maybe worse. Penn State, what they're going to do to Boise State, Mark, may be illegal in some states. I mean, it's going to get ugly quick. I mean, they might have 700 yards of offense in that game. I mean, you're going to just see a smattering of blue. It's going to look like Boise State's field. It's just going to be all blue because how many players are going to be down for Boise State?
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be ugly. UNLV, Georgia, Notre Dame has the chance to be a great game, but Mark, Notre Dame's the ultimate pretender. We all know that they're just there to whittle out the other pretenders because that's what they've done for the last 30 years. The only interest is Gunnar Stockton because he's the backup quarterback. I think if Carson Beck was in the game, we would all pick Georgia intuitively. Why Vegas thought Notre Dame should have been opening line favorites, no idea. Makes no logical sense. And I don't know, this is SEC homer take, so this is going to shock some people. The 2 best teams, Mark, are playing in the quarterfinal game in Oregon, Ohio State. Those are the 2 best teams this year. And one of them is going to not even make the semifinals. And it's going to be a tragedy.
Well, I can't disagree with any of that. Again, I am still holding on to recognizing conference champions and trying to keep intact this framework of a sport and not just isolating 2 conferences.
Well, I mean, I would love to give you a time machine and go 15 years in the past and be like, hey, we need to do something about this or be the Pac-12 commissioner. If you were the Pac-12 commissioner 10 years ago, Mark, maybe you could set the direction of the sport completely differently. But the West Coast, Mark, have shown us time and time again, outside of Oregon and USC occasionally, they don't care about football. So I can't make them care about football. I can't force them to care. And unfortunately, the South cares the most about football. Ohio State and Michigan now cares the most. And then Notre Dame kind of is in a weird spot with Penn State where they don't care as much as those places, but they care more than everybody else. And that's the way the sport is. And you can't change it.
So your perfect playoff system is what?
The 12 best teams get in.
You want 12? Let's start there.
No,
do you want 8? Do you want 16?
No,
you want 12?
I want the +1 system. That would be my perfect playoff, is the +1. You bring back all the New Year's Six bowl games. You bring back some conference ties, but you would have teams that didn't play one another facing the New Year's Six bowl games. And then you would take the 2 best teams that remain and have them play in the national championship. And that way it reduces the number of opt-outs because teams that are very far down the field will feel impacted and have a chance to win the national championship.
So the way this season was played and the results of this season, your bowl games would be what?
I haven't gone through and actually penciled it out because I'd have to see out, who played who and all that stuff, because I'd have to throw Ohio State, for example, couldn't play Indiana, but they would play Georgia, for an example, as a game. And then Oregon would play Texas, as an example. You just match up the best teams in the conference.
Okay. So you're not going to try to have a traditional Sugar Bowl with the SEC champion?
No. It should just be SEC 1, SEC 2, SEC 3, because all that stuff's meaningless. Conference championships games don't matter anymore. They're completely irrelevant. And they have been for a few years now. At least I'm the only one who's honest about it. Nobody cares this year Georgia beat Texas. Nobody's going to care about that if Georgia loses to Notre Dame and Texas goes to the national championship game. Nobody cared 2 years ago that Kansas State won the Big 12. The only way conference championship games matter is Arizona State won the Big 12 and Clemson won the ACC. Those are the only two conferences that actually matter now. And then whatever random group of 5 conference the committee selects. The Big 10 doesn't matter and who wins their conference. Honestly, the loser got more than the winner this year.
Yeah, the loser's in a better position. Yes, Penn State.
Which is sad and ridiculous. It makes no rational or logical sense.
I'm going to have to think about this one long and hard during the offseason and unveil some kind of a playoff situation, because it's easy to do if you just say, throw the committee at the rankings, screw the Big 12 and the ACC, if that's what it comes to be. If Florida State or Miami or Clemson get back to a level that they were at some time gone by, great. If not, we treat them as dirt and group of 5 and they're out. I just can't bring myself to that level of hierarchy of just basically having the SEC and the Big 10 and maybe Notre Dame playing in a playoff.
I get it, Mark. I get it. And
Just can't bring myself to it. I can't defend it logically, because I do believe that there were better football teams left out of the playoff, and I don't even think it was one. I don't think it was like, okay, Alabama or Ole Miss got screwed, but they played a tough schedule, but they got left out, and we elevated this other team, Indiana, SMU, whomever, Boise State, because we love the group of 5 and we got to get one of those teams in. No, I think we've got multiple teams. I think we have, 4 teams, I believe, are not in the 12 best in the country playing in this tournament.
Would they be Ole Miss, Alabama, South Carolina, Miami?
Those are probably the 4 that I would put in place of Arizona State, Boise State, SMU, and Indiana. Yes.
So you would still keep Clemson in there?
Oh, I forgot about Clemson. No, they're out too. They're not one of the 12 best teams in the country. So I guess we got to replace them. But now we're starting to run into teams that are. Now we're starting to run into maybe some of the teams I'm tossing out are connecting with, if you follow me, connecting in value with the teams that I generally don't think of Clemson as being one of the 12 best teams in the country, because I don't think anything they did this season shows them to be a top 12 team, other than playing South Carolina close, but losing and blowing a 17-point lead against a marginal SMU team. And when I say marginal, folks, I don't mean marginal like they're the 60th best team in the country, but I mean marginal among quality teams. They're like the 15th to 20th best team in the country, SMU, and Clemson actually got outplayed by them after an opening flurry to put them up 14-0 or 17-0. Clemson, other than that, beat the likes of Pitt and Virginia every week. Maybe Arizona State would be in the 12.
Maybe.
I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger on Florida.
Oh, I'm not either. I would rather
Going
have
there.
Colorado above Florida. Like, I think Colorado is just a significantly better version of Florida. And I actually think at the end of the year, they were playing in that arguably 12 best team range that
Okay.
we're talking about.
So once we start to dive into the Big 12, it's tough to differentiate Arizona State, Iowa State, Colorado.
Right. Like, I don't think the best
Okay.
teams in the conference should automatically be taken because of the schedule disparity. I believe if Colorado has been shown to be a better team than Arizona State, I don't care if Arizona State won the conference. I'd pick Colorado. That's how I'd do it.
Are you doing that based on results or just who you think are the best
It's a combination of both.
talented Travis Hunter and Shadur Sanders should be playing.
It's a combination of both. I think Colorado's over the course of the season has had great results, but I think the committee, you know, is going to have a storyline in there. Throw a bone. I mean, Arizona State's not going to win it all. Colorado's not going to win it all. So you might as well just throw a bone. That's what I would do, honestly. It'd bring excitement and entertainment to it, but we need to chop the fat off is what I would do. I think a happy compromise would be going to 8 because I don't think we're ever going to do the +1 model. I think it's too confusing. I think just getting rid of these teams outright would be best. And then having the G5 form their own playoff would help the sport out. Because I don't think it should be a good reward for Boise State to get blasted by 50, which I expect to happen. And I don't think it's fair to Indiana, SMU, and Clemson, all these teams who are just getting railroaded today because everybody's treating them as frauds. Everybody's just completely invalidating their season. Everybody's saying they're horrible, they were frauds, they're trash, and all this stuff. And I don't think that's fair to them fan bases as well. They've had a nice season, and they should deserve some sort of reward to it. And losing by 30 points in a playoff game is not the type of reward I'm expecting.
So you think it would be better for SMU and its fans, wherever they are, to take their 11-2 record and go to the Gator Bowl and play Kansas State?
Yeah. Okay. I think that would be much more enjoyable to the fan. I mean, if I was a fan today watching that team, I'd be like, oh, gosh, just get it over.
Once they had to experience it, yes, but the buildup and the hope of playing in a college football playoff and being relevant and talked about, I think means a lot to people.
I guess. Maybe it's just me being too cynical, Mark, but I don't believe in those type of teams ever doing anything. So if my team ever got in there, I'd be like, we got no chance. We got no chance. Just send us to the Quick Lanes Bowl, man, where we play Illinois or something like that where we can actually win. See, that's why I think the underlying problem in the sport is we treat these bowl games as completely irrelevant, which means to 98% of the country, basically, the whole season's irrelevant. Because Illinois is never going to win a national championship, Mark. I was never going to win a national championship. Wisconsin, these level programs aren't good enough to win it all, ever. So we've made a sport to where only like 10 or even less than 10 teams actually have a chance to do anything. And it's very sad to me.
Yes, it's sad to me as well. I just think our remedies are slightly or maybe significantly different. Yours is to just relegate the have-nots and give them a trophy for winning the Gator Bowl. Mine is to find some way to include them and give them a shot, but also reward the best teams in the country to have some type of it, which basically is what we have. We have a system that recognizes winning games and playing and winning conference championships, but we also select the best of the rest out of the power conferences. So that's what we have.
I know, and it's not a perfect system, but I'm hoping that these blowouts today will at least force them back to the drawing board, because it's clear that this product won't be able to survive in this iteration, at least past 2025. I'm hoping if there's more blowout games going next week and the week after that they'll potentially go back to the negotiation table, and the SEC and Big Ten will strong arm the other commissioners to give them 4 guaranteed playoff spots. That way the SEC and Big Ten can schedule tough interconference games. Because if I was the commissioner of the SEC right now, I would have Alabama loaded up against Mississippi State, Arkansas, Kentucky, those level teams. I wouldn't have them play Georgia. I wouldn't have them play Texas. I wouldn't have them play any elite SEC teams. Because
you would, because you would want the TV revenue. And you also have obligations to your media partner.
Okay, I would throw in as little of those as possible because, Mark, the playoffs is where all the money's at. I mean, people watch the playoff games way more than any regular season game. So I would just try to get as many teams in the playoffs as possible. So I would try to maximize it to where 6, 7 teams get in there in my league. That's what I would do. And I think that's what Greg Sankey should do and what I think he's going to do. And I think these non-conference games is going to be a start curtailing them back. because Alabama went on the road to play Wisconsin. Didn't get rewarded at all in the conversation because why? They lost to a 6-6 team that, and honestly, in the ACC or Big 12 in Oklahoma, would go what, 8-4, 9-3 most likely. So people just can't look past the record. So if the only thing that matters is your record, just schedule a bunch of cream cakes.
Again, folks, if you don't watch us during the off season, this is the kind of stuff we dig in, and I will be working overtime and working on a playoff system. All right, DeReal.
Yeah, no problem. I'm looking forward to the national championship game effectively in Oregon, Ohio State next week.
Our guy, DeReal MVP, showing up to break things down. All right, let's keep it rolling here. We got SEC football.
Hey, Mark. Can you hear me?
We can. How are you?
Not too well tonight.
You were obviously rooting for Tennessee.
Yes. I think I called in Thursday or Friday, and I said it was going to go either two ways, either a blowout or a close Tennessee win, and unfortunately, it went the blowout way. What is your opinions on people calling for Josh Heupel's name? Because I'm seeing it all over Twitter and on YouTube from their post game.
So you said people are calling for Josh Heupel what?
His name. They're calling for his name to be fired.
Oh, they're calling for him to be fired. I don't even think that's worth responding to. The guy took over a marginal program that was heaped in controversy and everything that had to be cleaned up following Jeremy Pruitt, and he's elevated it to one of the highest positions in the SEC. And he had a team 2 years ago that was a top 5 team in the country, had another successful season last year, goes 10-2 this year. I don't know what we're arguing here. He's gone to one playoff. This is his first playoff appearance. It didn't go well. They didn't play well, but he recruited and signed a 5-star quarterback and continues to roll in all sorts of talent. I'm not understanding. I don't even think it's worth addressing. And the University of Tennessee is not going to deal with their coach based on a bunch of morons who. Now, if we're 5 years down the road and he's losing in the first round of the playoff and they see themselves doing better than that, then so be it. They can certainly take action justifiably at that point, but not now.
Yes, I agree with you that he's the first coach to win 10 regular season games 2 times since Philip Fulmer did it, which is pretty astonishing.
Well, they've had a run of mediocre coaches and mediocre play since then, other than Butch Jones having a couple decent 9-4 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all I really wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And what we've typically done throughout the season is do a Sunday morning call-in show. I got to say, there's a lot of good topics for us to dive into and for me to look at concerning video production. So we may focus our time on that. And since this is not a typical college football weekend, of course, because we just had the 4 games and they were all exclusive TV windows and we didn't have the usual 60 games to talk about and another week coming up, we will probably put that on hold. And I've got some travel plans this week around the holidays, and so we will continue to release our schedule each and every day. We do appreciate you being here. Again, consider the book, Disputed National Champions. The link is in the description section of this and every video, or you can just go to Amazon and look it up, Disputed National Champions. I will be live possibly tomorrow with a transfer portal update with Leanne Herring. We have talked about possibly wrapping up the weekend with a transfer portal look, and also the Big Ten live shows coming up with Matt Zemek on Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. All right, folks, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully you've caught your name there at the bottom of the screen on the ticker as we have scrolled our Patreon and YouTube members. Thank you so much for your support. Appreciate you being here. Have a good night. We'll talk some college football real soon.